The Outermost House, A Year of Life on the Great Beach of Cape Cod by Henry Beston. Chapter 2, Autumn, Ocean and Birds. Section 2. It chanced that on a mild September morning, as I was standing a moment at a window, looking west over the marshes and the blue autumnal creeks, an alarm of some kind began to spread among the gulls. The incoming tide had already crowded the birds back on the higher gravel banks and bars, and from these isles, silvery cloud by cloud, I saw the gulls rise and stream away to the southward in a long, fugitive storm of wings. They were flying, I noticed, unusually low. Interested to see what had thus disturbed them, I stepped out a moment to the pinnacle of my dune. As I stood there, staring after the vanishing gulls and questioning the sky, I saw far above the birds and well behind them an eagle advancing through the heavens. He had just emerged from a plume of hovering cloud into the open blue, and when I saw him, first was sailing south and seaward on motionless wings, seeming to follow in the great sky the blue course of a channel far below. There are sandbars at the mouth of Norset Harbor. Many gulls feed there between the tides, and the gulls from the marsh joined forces with this gathering. As the eagle approached the bars, I looked to see if he would descend or fly out to sea. But no, at the harbor's entrance, he turned south, aligned his flight with the coastline, and disappeared. During the autumn, I saw this same bird half a dozen different times. I could tell when he was about by the terror of the gulls. Yet this eagle, for a bald eagle I believe him to have been, is, as Mr. Forbush says, by nature a fish-eater. I never saw him pay the slightest attention to the fugitives. Nevertheless, he may well have a fancy for gulls when they are plump and he is hungry. At any rate, they fear him. There are always a few black-backed or minister gulls mingled in with the herring gulls upon these flats, and these burly giants, I noticed, sought refuge with the rest. Eagles are by no means rare upon Cape Cod. The birds arrive here as coastwise visitors, find the region to their liking, and establish themselves in various favorite domains. They fish in our sandy bays and inlets. They have rather a fancy for the more isolated Cape Cod ponds. Seen at close range, the bald eagle is a dusky, brownish bird with a pure white head, neck, and tail. I never had a near view of this Eastham visitor, but one of the coast guardsmen roused him up one day from a thicket close by the head of a creek running up into the moors. He heard a sudden noise of brush and great wings, he said, and turning round, he saw the eagle rising, free of the scrub and the bright leaves. Ever since I came to live here on Cape Cod, I have been amazed at the number of land bird migrants I have encountered on the dunes. I expected to see sandpipers on the beach and scoters in the surf, for they are coastwise folk, but I did not expect to see the red-breasted nuthatch rise out of the September dunes, or find the charming black and yellow warbler sitting on the ridgepole of the forecastle, his black-tipped tail feathers turned to the Atlantic. But perhaps I had best begin at the beginning and tell how the sparrows and the warblers came down to us this autumn by the coast. Various new sparrows were the first strangers to arrive. There are summer sparrows here, a great abundance of them, for the marsh and meadowland west of the dunes is the natural habitat of many species. Walk through these grasslands on a summer's day, and you will see singles and flocks break from the sunburned stubble ahead, some to drop and hide again farther on, others to watch you from the Coast Guard wires. Song sparrows are notably abundant, for these pleasant singers frequent both the marshes and the dunes. But the seaside sparrow keeps more to the marsh rim and the salt hay mowings. The sharp-tailed sparrow fancies the wheel ruts of the hay carts, and the odd little grasshopper sparrow trills into the burning sundowns the two faint notes of his curious and poignant insect song. Early in September, Hudsonian curlews arrived in Eastham Marsh, and to see them, I began going to Norset through the meadows instead of by the beach. High September tides were then covering both marsh and meadowland, and as I pushed on each afternoon, the curlews rose from close behind the inundated road, and circling, called to other curlews. I could hear, when I listened, the clear reply. And then there would be silence, and I would hear the sound of autumn and the world, and perhaps the faint withdrawing roar of ocean beyond the dunes. When I reached the wider meadows on these days, I found the stubble mobbed with sparrows. The population had doubled in a week. Flocks of fox sparrows were feeding everywhere. I whirled up groups of savanna sparrows and families of white-throats. A solitary, white-headed sparrow watched me from the concealment of a bush. It was a silent throng. I heard faint tps and chips of alarm as I passed. Nothing more. Love-making was over and done, and all were importantly busy with the importance of their lives. On the 24th and the 25th, there was wind and rain, and on the 27th, I saw the first of the warblers. The weather had cleared, and I had risen early and begun to get breakfast. It is my custom here to sit facing the sea, and I was moving over my table when I noticed a small bird of some kind foraging about in the grass before the house. I could not see him well at first, for he had entered into the grass as into a thicket, but presently out he came, pushing through the stalks, and I watched him from the window unsuspected. This first arrival was a Canadian warbler, steely ash-gray above, yellow below, and with a broad band of black spots between his yellow throat and yellow belly. He was a charming bit of life. Over the pale sand, in and out of the tawny white roots, in and out of the variegations of morning light he moved, picking up seeds while a sea wind shook the tops of the dying grass above his head. Presently, in search of still more food, he turned the corner of the house, and when I went out after breakfast, he had gone. Then came, all in 1 week, a Wilson's warbler, a female probably, the black and yellow warbler, and a chestnut-sided warbler. The birds were singles. They traveled along the dunes. They fed on the fallen seeds. In October, I saw in 1 day 5 myrtle warblers. A pair of these lingered a week near Forecastle Dune. Then came juncos and a raid of pigeon hawks. The juncos, like the warblers, forage on the dunes, and the hawks hunted them there for an hour or so before the dawn. I went exploring one morning while Nauset was still flashing into a sullen, cold, and overclouded world, and saw a pigeon hawk rise unexpectedly out of the cut to the north with a wretched junco gripped beneath him. Flying seaward through the cut, the hawk carried his captive to the beach, found himself a sheltered nook close along the dune wall, stood at attention for a moment, and then unbent and ate. I saw various other migrant land birds as well, but I shall not dwell upon them, for the listing and cataloguing of species seems to me of less interest than their arrival by sea. This outer arm of Cape Cod, as I have already explained, stands 30 miles or so out from the continental main, yet there are land birds, little birds, going south along it as casually as so many Arctic geese. Riding here this cloudy morning, with a great confused roaring of breakers in my ears, I call to mind the Wilson's warbler, the female, I saw a fortnight ago, and I wonder where it was that she forsook her familiar earth for the grey ocean, an ocean she perhaps had never seen. What a gesture of ancient faith and present courage such a flight is! What a defiance of circumstance and death, land wind and hostile sea, the fading land behind, the unknown and the distant, articulate and imperious in the bright, aerial blood. But who shall say by what sea routes these landsmen reach the Cape? Some species, I imagine, cross Massachusetts Bay, their jumping-off place being north of Boston, Cape Ann or Ipswich perhaps. Some may cross over from the south shore at a point well north of Cape Cod Bay. Others undoubtedly come directly down from Maine. The wooded archipelago of Maine is a famous place for warblers. It is quite possible that the species I have mentioned may have followed some great river to the sea, the Kennebec or the Penobscot, perhaps, and cross from the river mouth directly over to Cape Cod. The Highland Light bears south 3/4 west from Seguin at the mouth of the Kennebec, and is separated from it by only 101 miles of open water. The birds could manage this easily. All over the world, land migrants go great distances over open water. Numbers of birds, for instance, migrating back and forth between Europe and North Africa cross the Mediterranean twice a year, and in our own hemisphere there are flights across the Gulf of Mexico and movements between the West Indies and our South Atlantic states. Late in October, there came an easterly gale, and in the afternoon, when the tide was high, I put on oilskins and went out to see the surf. About a mile to the north of the forecastle, as I was trudging on across the rain, I saw just ahead and close over the breakers a flying speck sailing landward out of the wreck, and even as I stared, it fell to the beach in danger of the waves. I ran ahead then and picked the thing up just as a slide of foam was about to overflow it, and found it to be an autumn leaf, a maple leaf, flat and drenched and red. Mid-October, the land birds have gone. A few sparrows linger in the marshes. The plum bushes have lost their leaves. Walking the beach, I read winter in the new shapes of the clouds.